I tell you, that song just does not get old to me. So, good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, depending on when you're watching this. Good to have you all on this special Friday afternoon session of Soul Vitamins with Dr. Derek Gilbert. We're going to be jumping right into this. So, without further ado, let's bring him on. Let's unmute his mic and maximize myself. So we got Dr. Derek Gilbert, the second coming of Saturn, the Dr. D Gizzle.
You're very gracious, but it is just Mister. I do not have a PhD.
Well, I'm gonna call you doctor, so you.
I'll take that as an honorary doctorate. High praise, thank you.
Well, it's Dr. Vodi Bakum says all the time, like he went to, I think it was Cambridge. He said, all you do is read. You just read and write papers, and the amount of stuff that you have read that you can recite. I'm like, yeah, I think he studied to show himself approved. I know people that got doctorates that don't know half of what this joker says off the top of his head, so I'm going to just call him Doc.
Well, again, I take that as high praise. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, now I can't help but call you doctor. Brother G, before we jump into everything, I actually, in the many hours of videos that I have watched from you, and it's funny because I've seen you, one of the first times I saw you, I was on tour. I was coming back from Lord knows where playing music. It was only maybe one or two other guys in the bus with the trailer, and I ended up on. You did an interview with the guys from End Times Productions, and the first video was like America's Fallen. It says, Dr. Derek Gilbert, Fallen Angels, Lucifer's True Identity, and Return of the Nephilim. And I watched it I think 3 times. I watched it once. Because it was a long drive home. We were coming back from Indiana or Ohio or something. I was like, by the time I got to the end of it, I was like, oh, yeah, we're gonna have to run that back. But of all the things that I've seen you, from Prophecy Watchers to the stuff with my brother Rudy to stuff with my brothers Nick and Jonathan Goss over at the Goslings, I've actually never heard your testimony. So I wanted you to kind of give us just a brief synopsis of your. You're coming to Christ, coming to the faith, and then we can jump into the stuff that everybody wants to know about.
I wish I had an exciting testimony. It's actually pretty boring. When I was
those are supposed to be the best ones.
Well, it doesn't make for a great story, but it is what happened. My sister and I were taken to church every Sunday by my parents. It was a very liturgical church, organ music. We all sat on our hands even after special music was performed because clapping in church was considered impolite, rude, not reverent enough, that kind of thing. And it was, I don't recall ever hearing the blood preached. Okay. We never really heard about the necessity of that sacrifice offered by Jesus on the cross. So yes, he died for our sins. Well, yeah, but why did he have to do it that way? I mean, why?
Yeah.
There was never really an explanation. And we did not talk about spiritual warfare and the existence of other entities in the unseen realm. So often the sermons were about Jesus as sort of a life coach. And this was at a United Church of Christ in Chicago. This is before the UCC really went far left. We moved out of Chicago when I was in high school, spent the next 4 years at an ELCA church, and that was before the ELCA went far left.
Where in Chicago?
Northwest side near North Avenue and Central, the Austin neighborhood.
My wife she grew up in Chicago. She was born in Chicago. Her, a lot of her family's still there. So,
okay.
Yeah.
There are things about Chicago I miss, but I miss the Chicago of my childhood, the 60s and 70s. And it changed a lot after we moved out. We moved out in 1977, and things were flipping in our old neighborhood. Austin at the time was a blue-collar neighborhood, a lot of Poles and Greeks and Roman Catholics. I was one of the few Protestant kids in my Cub Scout pack, so we'd go to St. Angela's Church for Mass, and I was just looking around what do we do next? Okay, kneel. Okay, stand. What now?
Kneel, stand.
Yeah, and so I didn't quite get it. I understand a little better now. I married a Roman Catholic, actually, and because I knew she wouldn't convert, I converted. And this, I was a young man, did not understand theology back then. It's been a long, strange trip. But anyway, in the 6th grade, I had a neighbor whose parents were Roman Catholic, Polish Roman Catholic, went to mass faithfully. She got saved at a little storefront Baptist church. And so she took me there. She was a few years older than me and took me for a showing of Thief in the Night, which was the movie about the rapture.
I know all about the Thief in the Night
Yeah.
series. That was what I asked for my graduation from high school present, was that whole series.
Yeah.
That's how much of a Bible nerd I go back.
So this would have been around 1972. Okay. So I was around 6th grade at the time. I don't know how old I was at 10, 11. So 72, 73. And I decided I didn't want to be left behind. So I asked Jesus to come into my heart, but didn't know what that meant, really wasn't discipled. Went through, at the time, the UCC was still having us go through catechism and, some of those things that are familiar to Roman Catholics and Lutherans, catechism, confirmation, that sort of thing in the 8th grade. Moved out to one of the far northwest suburbs in freshman year of high school. We moved out to McHenry, middle of McHenry County, and went to that ELCA church. And it was, again, a good group of people, wonderful folks, very warm, caring pastor, but I don't remember anything about spiritual warfare and the reason for Christ's mission to come and have to die on the cross for us. Who was he saving us from? He's saving us from our sins. Okay, that's kind of a nebulous concept that you don't really get your head around, especially when you're a kid.
Yeah.
So anyway, went off to college, high school, college, kind of fell away. In college, I was not required to get out of bed every Sunday morning. And usually Saturday nights were spent doing things that I'm not proud of now. So, Sunday morning was the time to sleep in and catch up. So didn't really go to church for a while until got into the radio business, was a top 40 radio disc jockey out of college for a number of years. As I said, married a woman who's Roman Catholic. And just to keep the family together, we were going to follow the traditions of our parents. Let's go to church every Sunday because that's what parents are supposed to do. And rather than force our daughter to have to ask the question, why is daddy going to one church and mommy going to another? So, okay, well, I know she won't switch, so I will. So I lived as a Roman Catholic for a number of years, probably about 7 years. And, rationalized it to myself by not thinking too much about it. Met some very nice people. And I came away convinced that there are a lot of people in the Roman Catholic Church who truly believe that their salvation is by grace through faith and not because they're performing the sacraments.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of things that you're supposed to do as a Roman Catholic that I never did. Never attended confession, not once, which is kind of an important thing under Roman Catholic doctrine, but it was never really pushed. It's like, okay, you're sort of going through the basics of it, and you look like a Roman Catholic, so we'll call you a Roman Catholic. Did I really buy into the doctrine? No. If anyone had asked me about papal infallibility and stuff like that, was Mary bodily assumed into heaven like Jesus was? Did she live a sinless life? No, I don't know. But that was good enough for. I will say this, Gabriel, what got me reading the Bible was not really the right reasons. I started digging into scripture when that marriage broke up, and I wanted to read the Bible to find out why I was right and my ex was wrong. I was trying to proof text the Bible so I could. And really, it started because I was angry with the Archdiocese of St. Louis, Missouri, because they wanted to charge $1,800 to declare our marriage annulled.
So you're saying it's still a racket, huh? It's still we're still trying to buy our way into heaven.
I hate to say it, but that's how it struck me at the time, and I think that's a valid way of characterizing it. It's like, look, you need to pay us to do this investigation, and then we'll just sort of rubber stamp the paperwork saying your marriage is annulled, which means then you can go on and you can come back to the church and you can take communion and you can participate in the sacraments, because if you don't, you're living outside of the bounds of what's allowed by the church, and you will be cut off from Jesus. Like, wait, first of all, you're telling me that by declaring our marriage annulled, you're saying it's annulled because officially Roman Catholicism does not sanction divorce. You're just saying that it was never spiritually consummated, which is a legalism that gets you around this. But then you're saying that my daughter is spiritually illegitimate. How can you do that? And so I started digging into the Bible for that. And then one night, as I was kind of tossing and turning, thinking about things, because I had physical custody of our daughter, who was 6 going on 7 at the time, realized I couldn't explain right and wrong to our daughter. Why is this right? Why is this wrong? Well, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what I base my morality on. Well, the Bible would be a good moral guide, but what if it's not true? Now, I don't credit myself for being that smart or wise. I think this was, the Holy Spirit sending an angel and saying, okay, whisper this in his ear.
Yeah.
Because that got me started looking into apologetics. Why do Christians believe the Bible is true?
Yeah.
And as it turns out, there are some really good reasons to believe that. There's some good apologetics ministries out there, but The Case for Christ by
Lee Strobel.
Lee Strobel, thank you. I was going to say Josh McDowell, but I read his book too, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And when you start digging, because that's what it took to convince me that this was all true, was evidence.
Yeah.
The logical chain of evidence, and the fact that, and what really kicked into high gear, and this was after Sharon and I met in 1997, which was as my first marriage was in the legal process of being, dissolved in the eyes of the state. I read in Strobel's book the description of the martyrdom of James and why that's so important to Christian apologetics. James, the half-brother of Jesus, who wrote the Epistle of James, we see in John chapter 7, verse 5, when Jesus' brothers confront him and say, hey, look, why are you hanging out here in the sticks up in the Galilee? And actually, it's not really the Galilee as we think of it. He was north of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus was about as far away from Jerusalem as you could get and still be in Judea back in the first century. Capernaum, where his ministry was based, where he lived, was on the north, is still on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee.
I've been there. It's beautiful.
It is. And I think it's really more significant than we've been taught, because Matthew said that his move there was the fulfillment of a very unique, very specific prophecy from chapter 9 of Isaiah. Anyway, so his brothers are telling him, you need to go to Jerusalem for the festival, which would have been the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, which was the main festival, still is, in the Jewish religious calendar. Over the 10-day period of the festival, 70 bulls were slaughtered according to the law, 13 on day 1, 12 on day 2, 11 on day 3, etc. 70 bulls, 70 being a number that is a symbol, not a physical number. It's not 7 times 10. It means all of them, not one left out, the complete set. In other words, it represented the gods of the nations, the fallen Elohim who'd been allotted to the nations, and it represented the fallen realm from whom Yahweh, God the Father, was rescuing his people. And his brothers are telling him, you need to go there. Basically, set up a tent. Put up a sign, because you'll never be famous if you hang out here. But verse 5 is the money quote, for even his brothers did not believe in him. They were mocking him. And yet, 30 years later, James was martyred. We read this in the writings of Josephus, the first century Jewish historian, who was a Pharisee. He had no reason to substantiate the truth claims of Christianity. So why would James suddenly flip like this? There's nothing in the Epistle of James that suggests he was mentally disturbed and willing to believe a lie and die for a lie.
Yeah, the mass, what do they call it? Not the mass hysteria, the mass...
psychosis.
Yeah, 500 people got...
Mass delusion. Yeah, and again, it's
the mental gymnastics.
You read 1 Corinthians 15, where Paul lays it out. The risen Christ appeared first to Peter, first to James, then to the 12, then to 500, most of whom are still alive, which is saying to the church at Corinth, hey, this resurrection thing is really important. If you don't believe me, go to Jerusalem and send somebody to Jerusalem and ask around, because there are still eyewitnesses 20 years after the fact. But that line about appeared first to Cephas, Peter, and then to James, that was what caught me. As soon as I read that, having read the Josephus section and realizing John 7, he didn't believe in him, he was martyred. Oh, he saw his dead brother come back to life. Boom. That, I'll tell you, Gabriel, at that moment, it was like a sea change.
Yeah.
And this was around 1997. So here I am, age 35 now, when I finally come to that realization. So I would say, yeah, I accepted Christ in 6th grade, but it was age 35. I don't remember the date, but sometime in the fall of that year, boom. That's when everything changed, because then okay,
Wouldn't
well,
it be
Jesus
interesting?
then,
Wouldn't it be interesting if it was around the time of Sukkot?
it it might have been. It might have been. All I know was it was after Sharon and I began communicating, which was in July of that year. It was before we got married. So sometime in the second half of 1997 was when this happened. But I remember distinctly the feeling of reality shifting, because it dawned on me then, hey, wait a minute. Jesus said that Abraham was real and that Moses was real and that all in the law and the prophets hang on the... So Jesus validated all that Old Testament stuff. Oh,
Yes.
wow. I've got some thinking to do. And I also need to rethink the way I'm living my life. So that was kind of the key moment there in 1997, when all of that suddenly shifted. And it took that chain of evidence. James was Jesus' brother. He didn't believe in him. He became a leader of the church, and he was willing to die rather than recant his testimony that his half brother...
He was one of the first martyrs. I mean, like, Stephen was, I think, the first, but I mean,
well, Stephen was early on, 33 or 32, 33 AD. James was about 30 years later, but yeah, it wasn't too long after that most of the rest were martyred as well, including Paul.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredible, but it kind of it makes me chuckle inside, because I'm actually probably in the next few weeks going to start showing the Thief in the Night series to my daughter, because I think especially for modern believers, really up until, and even when I was growing up, I was talking about this. I've got a very, very diverse view and upbringing in ministry. I mean, it grew up mostly Pentecostal. But recently, I've worked with Baptist, non-denominational, even served a little over a year in a Reformed Presbyterian church. So trying to get a holistic whole view of the church, and even becoming friends with an Anglican Orthodox priest, and start, wanting to get involved and serving them with music whenever I can. But, like Paul Bunyan, Pilgrim's Progress, that was hey man, you get your King James and you get that. And that was kind of, I mean, for American Christianity, those are like, hey man, you got to have these two books, right?
It took me a second to catch up, because Paul Bunyan had Babe the Blue Ox. He was the giant tree cutter.
Did I say Paul Bunyan? Oh yeah. My gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, no, not
John Milton,
not the Nephilim with the bull.
John Milton. Close though, close.
Yeah,
see, you can make that. Yeah, John Milton. Sharon's been
Go ahead.
Sharon's been trying to get me to read Milton and Paradise Lost for a long time, and I really need to.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You have so little time, and reading for me, I have to shut everything down, because I got to engage both halves of my brain. I don't like. I've actually found that I absorb educational reading better in an audiobook, because I'm an oral learner. I'm a musician. So if I listen to it, I can spit it back to you nearly immediately, and with, very, very great, very good accuracy. If it's educational reading, I'm like 75-80%, which is still good. But if it's a novel, man, I'll write you the soundtrack, So like that was like with Jonathan's book of the first of the Heavenly Realms. I finally finished the first of the series, and I was like, dude, I read the prologue, I think 3 times before I actually got into the book, and then I nearly finished the book in two sittings.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, the whole the Thief in the Night was kind of for me, like, I think for like maybe 10 to 20 years, it was like, man, like everybody, if you are a premillennial dispensational Protestant, you saw that film. Like
Right.
that was just like, it was just assumed that was a must, right? And I feel like when the what's the Rapture books that came out
Oh,
in
Left
the
Behind.
yeah, when that came out, it kind of, everybody's like, oh, that's a better version, but then the films weren't as good, and then everybody kind of forgot about those. I think it's necessary to show that film, especially if you teach that theology and you believe in it, because it's, though the acting and the cinematography is not great, you get how shocking that's going to be.
Right, right.
You
Well,
know,
like I said, it scared me, and I'm guessing that it started me down the path, and the Holy Spirit didn't let go because even though it took 20 years for me to really get it, or more, that I finally got it. It kind of took a spiritual 2x4 to the side of my head, but I think for a lot of people that's what it takes, because we get so comfortable in the natural realm, surrounded by these natural things and these distractions and physical pleasures that we can engage in, that we think that we don't need anything, not realizing how spiritually sick and undernourished we are. And by the way, I was John Bunyan. It's not John Milton. John Milton is Paradise Lost.
yeah, we got
So
three.
it is Bunyan.
That was a 3-for-1.
Yeah, Paul, John, Bunyan, Milton. Yeah.
Yo, what's up, Nick Goss? What's going on, brother?
Hello, Nick.
Yeah, so let me so Rod Saunders is here in the chat, and he said nothing says party like a bunch of slaughtered bulls, and especially with you being a former DJ host, I tied that into Elton John.
Yeah.
I was like,
There
somebody
you go.
call Elton John because we got to slaughter. But I actually put the link to that interview, the first interview I saw with you, because I think you talk about the 70 Elohim, the 70 gods in that talk.
Right.
So I think for those of you who that went over your head, definitely go and check that out, because you'll understand the context of that. So, hey, Mom, good to see you, Mom. I'm so glad that you are safe from that hurricane that just blew through Florida.
Amen.
So okay. So we got Thief in the Night, 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
That seed finally comes to fruition in 97. Now, how do you go from, okay, you're reading Lee Strobel, Case for Christianity, and then you're into tracing the names of these ancient gods, pagan gods, into these false gods of the Bible, Nephilim, giants? Like, walk us through that, because that's the journey is so interesting.
Well, after Sharon and I met and got married, between the time that we met over the internet back in 97, when only 20% of America was online, so that was unlikely.
AOL, son, AOL.
Yeah. You've got mail. We got married in early 98. Our friends thought we were crazy. Family probably thought so as well, but they were very gracious about keeping it quiet. Now here we are 26 and a half years later, so God knew what he was doing. Amen. We found that we had a lot of things in common, like love of science fiction, love of conspiracy stuff. I mean, the X-Files was hot back then, so we made a point, we were watching the X-Files every Sunday night. Every Friday night it was Millennium, which was another Chris Carter show that was brilliant the first 2 seasons. Third season, but it really got us excited about because there was, even though the theology was messed up, as it was in the X-Files, it did get us thinking about how do we tell those kind of stories in from a theologically accurate position. Yes. Around 2002, I saw a notice on the web, story online about this new thing called National Novel Writing Month. It was a challenge being issued by these people out in San Francisco to spend 30 days during the month of November, and the challenge is to write 50,000 words, which is kind of the low end for a novella. You really want to be above 75, 90,000 words to make it a good, 250, 300-page book. So I said to Sharon, hey, we need to try this, because I knew from our initial exchanges that she was a writer and had a gift for writing. I said to her, I can't write. She said, yeah, you can. No, I can't write. I said, but I really admire those who can. So anyway, we took up the challenge in 2002. She blew past it, wrote like 110,000 words in 30 days. I got like 25,000, but I finally completed that novel, which was finally published as Iron Dragons, which is sort of a science fiction fantasy mashup, because I I didn't like a lot of the fantasy that I'd read, because it seemed to me the authors would just cheat and change the rules of the fantasy universe whenever they were in a plot corner.
Wrote themselves into the corner.
So anyway, my second novel, The God Conspiracy, which we republished because it involved a vaccine that was being forced on people, suddenly became a lot more relevant in 2020. So I edited that just a little bit, and we republished it in 2020. Yeah. But it borrowed from Sharon's earlier novel, The Armageddon Strain, which is now out and more relevant than ever. So we've been doing some writing of in the same fictional universe, but sharing characters back and forth. So people who've read The God Conspiracy will know there's some characters drawn from her novels, Winds of Evil and The Armageddon Strain, which are now back out. She actually found a publisher who was interested, a Christian publisher, interested in launching a line of fiction, and thought that the concept of husband and wife authors writing separately but sharing characters and, was really interesting. So they published her novel, first novel, Winds of Evil, the second novel, The Armageddon Strain, and they were working on The God Conspiracy, editing it, when they started getting cold feet. You guys are including things like crop circles and demons. Yeah. And government conspiracies and cover-ups. Yeah. Well, apparently those weren't as popular during the George W. Bush years as they were during the Clinton years. So we wound up parting ways with that publisher. But it did get us started, and it got us started podcasting, because the publisher asked us how we plan to market the novels. Our reaction at first was we thought that's what the publisher's job was. But anyway, we started podcasting because the code for sending out podcasts had just been developed in the fall of 2004. So spring of 2005, less than 6 months after the code was out there, back when Apple was still actively soliciting people to submit podcasts. I mean, this is before,
wow.
Excuse me, every broadcaster had a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We started putting together our weekly podcast. Show number 1, buy our novels. Okay, what do we do next week? So we started talking about why we wrote what we wrote. And that, okay, now what? Well, maybe we can find a way to record phone interviews. And as I was telling you off air, Gabriel, this is before Skype, before Zoom, before, the tools that we use now, like Restream and Riverside and so on. I found at Radio Shack a doohickey, and I think that's what the official name was, a doohickey with a couple alligator clips and an audio
made in Taiwan.
Yeah, that allowed me to connect to a Sony Handycam, and we routed that through my MacBook. We managed to make it work. And so we started interviewing people like Tom Horn, Dr. Michael Heiser, L.A. Marzulli, and others who kind of led us to where we are now. I guess we hit it off with Tom. And so when he started putting together the first prophecy conferences back in, well, not the first ever, but I mean, the first of this kind of alternative Christian genre, Prophecy Watchers, Skywatch TV, even before it was Skywatch TV and Prophecy Watchers, the Branson Future Congress in 2011, he invited us to come along and just interview people. Bring your podcast gear, come and ask questions. And then they got the bright idea to put a camera in there so that they would have extras for the DVD set after the event.
Well, they're all watching Chuck Missler, and he recorded everything. So they're like, I think Chuck's onto something.
Exactly. So we started doing that. They let me keep the audio, and they took the video, put it on the DVD sets. Then they started asking us to speak. And they come around to 2014 when Tom was getting ready to launch Skywatch TV, and he asked if we'd be interested in coming down to the Ozarks. And Sharon had just put out a small book through Defender Publishing called Ebola and the Fourth Horseman of the Apocalypse. Asked her to be one of the pilot, or one of the guests on one of the pilot episodes. And while we were here, he asked if we'd be willing to move from Illinois to come down here. Now, I had been feeling led to do something other than what I was doing at the time. I'd been working for 7 years for a steel company based out of Birmingham, Alabama, 4 years in outside sales. And, it was getting to the point, was like, okay, I've got this list of customers, and it's, go visit 10 guys today, go visit 10 guys tomorrow, and it was not a bad job as jobs go. They treated us very well, but I just felt like there was something else I was supposed to be doing. And I
Hmm.
was driving Sharon nuts because she could tell I wasn't happy. So she said, talk to some, wise brothers, among whom Tom Horn. And Tom said, well, yeah, I can't really talk about much now, but here, well, come on down to it. So anyway, in fact, it was October 10 years ago that we were here in the Ozarks for the first time. Sharon guested
Wow.
on the program, one of the pilot episodes. Gary Stearman was the host, and
Yeah.
Tom made the offer, and we decided to take a leap of faith, and here we are. So, and it turns out I can kind of write after all. So, we've got I forget 8 or 9 nonfiction books, co-authored 4 of them, but 5 solo, I think. I lose track. It's anyway.
Well,
But
are they on your website?
yeah, gilberthouse.org or
Well, yeah, I'm on both. I've got both of them up there. So,
yeah,
and I dropped both of them in the chat. So, you guys got a lot of books. Winds of Evil, Gates of Hell, Armageddon Strain, The Poisoned Pawn, What Lies Beneath. And if I
now
can,
What Lies Beneath is a DVD. So we got some video content that we're putting out there as well. They only come out at night. Our good friend Vicki Joy Anderson authored that, and we're very honored to put that out in our store.
she's done some tremendous interviews over there at the Goslings. Shout out to the Goslings.
Yes, she has. She is brilliant, and we're blessed. She and her dad live about 10 minutes away from us, and we love the two of them to death. So anyway, we're very happy with what we're doing. I can't imagine doing anything other than what we're doing right now, and just praying for physical strength and the mental clarity to keep doing this as long as possible.
Well, I think it's definitely the time for it. Sometimes we wonder, Lord, why do I? Yeah, why am I on the bench? Like, well, because man, it's not. I got to save you for the right part of the game. You don't put your relief pitcher in the third inning. I'm not even a baseball guy. I'm just Dominican, so it just comes out sometimes. But I think with the internet, with YouTube especially, exploding on the scene in the early 2000s with viral videos, but especially with guys like Dr. Chuck Missler, Ellie Marzulli. I remember I was 12 or 13. I was going through this discipleship program with Bill Cloud. I don't know if you've familiar with Bill Cloud. Works with Perry Stone, and he's got a Hebrew roots ministry, Shorashim ministry. He's been they have a tremendous congregation ministry now in Cleveland, Tennessee called Jacob's Tent. So I was the only one in my youth group to finish this discipleship program. And, part of it was reading the entire Bible along with acts of service at the church, doing teaching, actually. So I remember reading through, and I had memorized scripture beforehand, but that was the other thing. I had to memorize 100 verses. And I remember reading in Genesis 6 about those mighty men, the giants, and I had an NIV, so it didn't actually even say Nephilim. It said giants, right?
Right.
So, and that always bothered me because I'm like, okay, I know we have giants here, and afterwards, because we all know about Goliath and his brothers. I'm like, but how do you get giants from people?
Mm-hmm.
It never made sense to me, right? Because especially in the NIV, it doesn't say, it's, sons of God, and everybody,
right. Those are the righteous sons of Seth who commingled with the evil daughters of Cain.
Exactly. How does that make giants? Even as a young teenager, I was like, apple plus apple does not equal watermelon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get out a watermelon out of two different species of apple. They're still apples. So, and I think this is why you're coming to prominence in this ministry that God has given you and your wife. Because man, people are asking questions. They're seeing, night paralysis is.
Yep.
People are seeing these entities now. They're filming them in Vegas. They're seeing these creatures, not just the crafts. It's an explosion of these things. And for so long, the church they haven't had an answer. They just ignore it. They're just like, oh, it's just they were going along with the U.S. government saying, oh, it's just a conspiracy. And then the U.S. government during COVID says, oh, yeah, no, they're real. Yeah, we don't know what they are.
Yeah,
and you believe that? They lied to you for like 100 years. And you're like, oh, we don't know what they are. You really, you going to buy that? So, yeah. So, what I wanted you to take the rest of the time for as long as you're available, because I don't want to tell your whole Friday night. What's up, puppy? I've seen that dog so much on your Instagram.
That is hilarious. Grace the rescue dog. Yeah.
We love
and
rescue puppies.
There goes Glory in the background.
Stretch it out, pup. Stretch it out.
Grace and Glory. Yeah.
Talk to us just a little bit. For those of you, here that may have never heard of your ministry, give us just a quick overview of, walk us through these ancient gods. If you can tie it into Mount, help me out. Yeah, Hermon. Walk us through that, and then why is this important today, especially concerning end time prophecy? That's what we want to get to. I did a 6-week course in my church, starting with evolution, biblical creation, just to get them to the Nephilim, because I'm like, if you don't understand this is not going to make sense to you. And I don't know how much of this you've been taught wrong, because I had people that were in their 70s to 11-year-olds in that class. Mm-hmm. So kind of break it down for us, Doc. I'm going to be quiet and get this lesson one more time, because I love it.
Well, we did a book on this called Veneration, which really focused on this and drilled down into it. This is essentially the story of how demons came to be.
Yes.
And there are a number of lines of evidence that we've pursued. Now, I know that there are good friends of ours, like L.A. Marzulli, Timothy Alberino, who spent a lot of time, personal expenditures, personal resources, and risk their reputation to go out and look for physical evidence of these entities. We have all the respect in the world for L.A., for Timothy, for Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, and that work.
Yes. We
didn't want to try to duplicate that work. So what Sharon and I have done, we're sort of like the librarians of this group, okay? The ones who dig into the text and dig it up. Maybe librarian's not quite the right term, but the researchers digging into the ancient texts.
Yes.
And when you start doing this, you find that, contrary to what most people might think, these entities called Nephilim, when they're referred to in Genesis chapter 6, but referred to by not just the Hebrews, but by their pagan neighbors, the Canaanites, the Amorites, as Rephaim or Rapayuma in the Canaanite. They were well known to their pagan neighbors. In fact, they were worshipped by their pagan neighbors, part of their religion. Mm-hmm. The story goes like this. At some point in the distant past, entities referred to in Genesis 6 as sons of God, B'nai Ha-Elohim, which is a phrase that always, contrary to what you may have heard, contrary to what some teachers on the internet claim, means spiritual beings.
Yeah.
The cognate phrases, meaning same phrase in a different language, to B'nai Ha-Elohim, means sons of the God or sons of the gods, plural. They do not ever refer to humans. Right. So these entities commingled with human women and created these monstrous heroes who, in the Hebrew, clearly were not ever supposed to happen. It's not really explored in depth in Genesis. Why? Probably because the people around Moses knew the story. They didn't need to have it explained in depth. We do get it explained in depth in a document called the Book of First Enoch, which is not in the Bible. And there are good reasons for it. There are some internal contradictions, inconsistencies in that book. There were some early church fathers who did believe it should have been in the Bible. Ethiopian church.
It was up until, it's even in the 1611 King James.
Yeah, but it was not universally accepted, other than in the, it certainly was not ever really promoted by the Roman Catholic Church. By the time you get to 1611 King James, the Anglicans had split away from the Roman Catholic Church, so they were doing a few different things.
Yeah,
but
it was in the conversation for
a long time,
up until the last 300, maybe 400 years of the church.
Really, and really for the first 400 years, it was a serious part of the conversation, because until the time of Augustine in the early 5th century, the 400s AD.
Boy, he gets such I feel bad for that church father.
I mean, he was brilliant. He
But
was
boy,
brilliant.
he did some stuff. He threw a little bit too much hot sauce and spices in the recipe.
A couple of things he did that we can hold against him. Number one was he really popularized a theory that had been put forward about 100 years before him by Julius Africanus, which is the sons of Seth theory.
Yeah.
These sons of God. Hey, look, we see in the Greek New Testament that we're called sons and daughters of God, so that must refer to humans. Well, no, it's a different context, different language, different setting. In the Old Testament and in the Hebrew, those words always refer to supernatural entities. And then a lot of things don't make sense when you strip out that supernatural underpinning back in Genesis chapter 6. Anyway, Julius Africanus put it out there in the 4th century. Augustine took it and ran with it, and he popularized it. Brilliant theologian, but he was wrong about that. Anyway, these giants were destroyed by the flood of Noah. This is all laid out in the first 36 chapters of the book of First Enoch, which is referred to as the book of Watchers. Mm-hmm. Watchers is a class of angel. Okay.
Yes.
Watchers are mentioned in the Bible. Daniel chapter 4, we read that a watcher in Nebuchadnezzar's dream descends from heaven and tells him, hey, because you're a jerk, we've decreed this punishment on you. This punishment is by decree of the Watchers, which suggests that Mike Heiser was right about the divine council worldview.
Well, yeah.
God basically, for his own pleasure, created a council like a court around a king to execute his will and administer his creation. So Watchers, not all bad. There are faithful, loyal Watchers, as in Daniel chapter 4.
Exactly.
The ones that we see back in the book of First Enoch, they were rebellious. These are the 200 who descended to Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon, actually, I had to look up the pronunciations. Mount Hermon. And they committed this sin, which they knew was going to be a grievous sin. Why did they do it, knowing that this was a terrible sin?
Which is why Semyaza was like, listen, y'all are taking an oath, because if I'm doing this, I ain't going down alone.
Exactly.
You're coming down with me.
I've actually talked with L.A. Marzulli about this, and he speculated that this might have been at the encouragement of the accuser, the adversary, the Satan, who said, hey, if you create this hybrid army, it can wipe out humanity. Now, the one, Yahweh, will probably be real upset about this, but he'll send you down to the abyss. We'll break you out. We'll bust you out. No problem. This may have been Satan's way of eliminating a rival. It's like Democrats, they all hated Donald Trump, but they were fighting with each other to see who'd replace him.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going on in the spirit realm, where you've got enemies to the true king competing with one another for control. In the Old Testament, Satan is like the prosecuting attorney. He accuses Job. He accuses Joshua, the high priest in the time of Zechariah, but he's never connected to the netherworld or the underworld or the Rephaim or the Nephilim. But by the time of the New Testament, Jesus says, after he's asked, accused of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebul or Baal the prince, he says, how will Satan's kingdom stand if Satan cast out demons by his own power? It's like, oh, okay. So by the New Testament, Satan is now the king of the world, the God of this world, the prince of this world. Something happened between the Old Testament and the New, and Satan is in temporary control over creation. Anyway, the giants destroyed in the flood of Noah. This was understood, and again, it's spelled out in the book of First Enoch as the origin of demons. But what's really interesting is that the Greek poet Hesiod, who wrote in the 7th century BC, roughly the time of Isaiah, Jeremiah, somewhere in there, he wrote that the men of the golden age, the demigods, the heroes who lived during the time of Kronos, when Kronos ruled in heaven, Kronos being the Titan king, who was
the
banished,
father of Zeus.
Right. The storm god Zeus, just Baal by a different name. He was the Greeks and Hebrews knew, the Greeks and the Canaanites knew it. Baal is Zeus. This was Hesiod's explanation for the origin of daemons. When they died peacefully, and daemons appeared from them, and they are kindly traveling earth and helping humanity and so forth. And that's where we get the word demon in the New Testament. From the spirits, daemons, Daimones. But what's really interesting is that the phrase that he and Homer used, Homer, the Iliad,
from the
the
Iliad.
Odyssey,
Yep.
right? the phrase that they used for the men, the demigods of the golden age before the flood when Kronos still ruled is moropes anthropoi. Now, anthropoi is where we get anthropology, means men, humanity, okay? Moropes in the Greek, according to a scholar named Amar Anus, back in 1999, wrote a paper, Were There Greek Rephaim? And he showed that etymologically, the origin of that phrase used by Homer and Hesiod for these demigods of the Golden Age is the same Semitic root word behind Rapayuma or Rephaim. The Greek demigods like Heracles, Hercules, and Perseus.
And Perseus, yep.
They were the Nephilim of Genesis chapter 6. And the Greeks knew it because the Greeks were in the Holy Land from the time of Abraham on. The Hivites or Hivites that are in Genesis and Deuteronomy, those were the Ahiyawa, which is a Luvian, which is related to Hittite, name for the Mycenaean Greeks, who were the Greeks of Agamemnon and Ajax, who fought against the Trojans in the Trojan War. So this is what Sharon and I do. We look into these texts and find, hey, the Canaanites have regular rituals where they would summon the Rephaim to a ritual meal in the Tabernacle of Eld. Well, that's the summit of Mount Hermon, according to these secular peer-reviewed scholars.
Yeah.
So we can show that the culture around ancient Israel, this veneration of these spirits, who they knew were the spirits of the heroes, the demigods of the Golden Age, were part of their religious milieu. They were part of the unseen realm.
Yeah.
And the Israelites were drawn into this. And God said, don't do this because bad things will happen. You know, it's like a father talking to a 4-year-old. It's dark. You need to come in because bad things might happen out there. But Bobby and Johnny are staying outside. I'm not there. You come in.
Yeah.
Their parents will deal with that. This was Israel, okay? God, according to Deuteronomy 4, 18 and 19, had allotted the sun, the moon, the host of heaven, the heavenly army, in other words, angels, to serve as the gods of the other nations. But Israel belonged to him.
Yes.
So when he gave the law to Moses, sort of like daddy telling 4-year-old Derek, time to come in. Oh, but yeah. And all you know as a kid is daddy is mean. But that's God trying to protect the Israelites because he knows 1,400 years down the line, the Messiah will come from these people that he's trying to protect, even though they don't understand his reasons for giving him these rules.
Yeah.
And trying to protect them from these spirits, including the spirits of the Rephaim. One of the things about Goliath that we found fascinating, and for a while I was of the belief that Goliath was tall, but not supernaturally tall. I've changed my mind on that thanks to a paper by Dr. Clyde Billington. Goliath probably 8 feet tall. Sharon, being the geneticist, says it could have been done epigenetically. Rituals and things that switched on certain genes that are not normally switched on in humans.
Like Nimrod. It said he became a Gibberim, you know.
To explain how we get these giants after the flood without necessarily having more watchers cohabiting with human women. They were lured into performing rituals. And this is where it's really interesting when you see the story in, I believe it's 1 Samuel 21. I'm going to have to look it up to make sure I'm not giving the wrong chapter
address
here. Yeah, or maybe it's 1 Samuel 28, where David has to go and fight or maybe it's 2 Samuel. Anyway, it's where David and his men take down the giants of the Philistines. 2 Samuel 21, where he almost gets killed by a giant, one of the descendants of the giants named Ishbi. It looks like Ishbi ben Ab. It's Ishvi ben Ov. Ishvi ben Ov. And that last word, should be 2 separate names. Ben, son of, Ov, meaning the owner of a necromantic ritual pit. Okay. Ov, like the Ov of Endor that Saul visited the night before he died. Credit to Brian Godawa for spotting this. The Ov derives from an ancient Hurrian practice. The Hurrians were the Horites of the Bible, where they would dig a ritual pit into the earth, sacrifice a small animal, and then summon entities from the netherworld. Ask them for favors and then send them back. But here's the thing. Ishvi ben Ov, okay, son of the medium, son of a woman who would practiced this, or maybe a man who practiced this, summoning spirits from the netherworld. The word translated descendant, and we see it used 3 times in that chapter at least. Saph, who was one of the descendants of the giant, a man of great stature with 6 fingers in each hand and 6 toes in each foot, and he also was descended from the giants. 2 Samuel 21, beginning at verse 15 through 22.
We got it on the screen.
All right. The word translated descendant.
Right there.
Just checking back there to see if Glory's tearing anything up. No, she's okay. She's got a chew toy. She's good. The word translated descendant does not mean genetic blood descendant. Okay. The word is yalid. Yalid. In Hebrew, that phrase, descendant of the giant or descendants of the giant, yalid ha Rapha. Ha is the definite article the. And Rapha is singular. So it should read yalid the giant. Yalid means one who is a member of a group into which one has been initiated or consecrated. So these descendants of the giants, or the Rapha, which again is singular, not plural. And who or what is the Rapha? Rapha is the singular form of Rephaim.
Yeah.
Is he the creator of the Rephaim? Is he Shemyaza, the one who led the rebellion that led to the creation of the Nephilim? That's speculation. We don't know because the Bible doesn't tell us. But what this does tell us is that these guys were members of a cult into which they'd been initiated or consecrated. They were essentially members of a warrior cult, and with the clue of that name Ishvi ben Ov, a woman who summons, or man who summons spirits from the netherworld. Probably members of a cult that venerated these mighty men who were of old, these warrior kings of long ago who were worshipped by the Amorites and the Canaanites. So you've got this warrior. The closest equivalent I can think of is like the Viking berserkers.
Yeah.
Who were so ferocious on the battlefield, they supposedly couldn't be hurt, couldn't feel pain, but they were so insane and so violent that the Norwegians and the Danes and the Swedes, the Vikings basically said, okay, we're not doing any more berserkers because they're killing everybody. They kill our own guys. I think they were demonically possessed. And I think that's what we're dealing with here with the Philistine giants. Yeah, Goliath was 8 feet tall, but we don't know that these guys were necessarily supernaturally big. Yeah, you got the guy with the 6 fingers and 6 toes who is large or a man of great stature.
Yeah.
But I think the key to understanding what these guys are about is that they're devotees, worshipers of the Rapha, the giant, the Shemyaza, I think. But again, that's speculation. But this is the cult that surrounded ancient Israel. I mean, God sent a plague that killed 24,000 Israelites when they were camping on the plains of Moab because, according to Psalm 106, verse 28, it wasn't the fertility ritual that the young Israelite man and the Midianite princess were conducting. Phinehas stabbed them. When you read between the lines of the text, there were only a couple of physical positions they could have been in for him to get them both with one stab. It was because they were eating sacrifices offered to the dead. This, I think, is the war for a description of the war that we're dealing with here. In fact, it's the reason that Skywatch TV's virtual conference, which begins November 30th, is titled The Resurrection War, because I think that's what it's all about. It's about resurrection. And how does this refer to these entities and these spirits? I think you put together Isaiah 26 and Ezekiel 39, and you get the answer. Isaiah 26, beginning of verse 13. I think read this as a prophecy. O Yahweh, our God. And by the way, I'm not a sacred name guy. I just think that, oh Lord, is so generic that it doesn't really convey the sense that you're speaking to, even though he's, unseeable, unknowable, he is a person, and Yahweh is his name, as he revealed himself to Moses. O Yahweh, our God, other lords besides you have ruled over us, but your name alone we bring to remembrance. That's significant because, by the way, this cult of the Rephaim, this cult of the deceased ancestors, required that once a month you had a ritual meal where you summoned your ancestors by name, like a necromancy ritual, and then you would feed them by smearing bread on a little statue that represented like the household gods of Jacob's father-in-law. That's what those were used for, according to scholars. So you'd feed them by smearing bread on the little statue, then you'd pour out a drink offering on the ground. So they would be fed and given drink, and they would be sustained in the afterlife as long as you continued keeping their name in remembrance. This is why, by the way, in 1 Samuel 18:18, David's son Absalom erects a pillar for himself in the valley of the kings, for he had no son to keep his name in remembrance. This was a big deal.
Yeah, you talked about that as well with Abraham, you know. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Yeah.
Right. That's why they were so distressed at not having a descendant. If you didn't have descendants who would keep your name in remembrance, you would fade away and disappear. You would cease to exist. So this is Isaiah saying, other lords besides you have ruled over us, but your name alone we bring to remembrance. And this is why he says this in verse 14. They are dead, they will not live. They are shades, but that word is Rephaim. They are Rephaim. They will not arise. He's talking about resurrection here. To that end, you have visited them with destruction and wiped out all remembrance of them. And then when you go down to verse 19.
Interesting that the complete Jewish puts it as ghosts. I wonder what the Orthodox Jewish Bible puts it as. I wonder if we get the actual word. Do we get the actual word?
If things are
Rephaim, there it is, y'all. So see, y'all, he's not talking out the side of his face. There it is for everybody to see.
They are Metim, dead. They shall not live. They are Rephaim, which should be a proper noun. That's what they are. They are not the human dead. They are these demigods, these hybrids who were forbidden to join the human dead in Sheol. Or at least they were not commingling in Sheol. In Ezekiel 32, there's a reference about the Sheol, or the chiefs of the Gibberim, the chiefs of the mighty, in the midst of Sheol, like they had as like a special place. But anyway, I digress. Verse 19, your dead shall live, talking about the faithful now. Their bodies shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy. For your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the Rephaim. Now, this seems to contradict verse 14 above. But when you read the Septuagint translation, which is the translation that was done from Hebrew into Greek around 200 BC.
Oh, yeah.
So about 2 centuries before Jesus. For look, the Lord is bringing from the holy place the anger against those dwelling upon the land. No, I'm sorry, I skipped down to verse 21 there. Here we go. The dead will rise, and those in the tombs will be raised, and those in the earth will be cheerful. For the dew from you is a remedy for them, but the land of the impious will fall, or the land of the ungodly will fall. And a scholar named Brooke W.A. Pearson wrote a paper on this some years back and said, look, the Septuagint was translated in a Greek milieu. The Greek culture, the Greek religion was very well known to the Jewish religious scholars who translated the Septuagint. So that verse actually means the land of the ungodly, referring to Tartarus, where the sons of God from Genesis 6, the Titans of Greek mythology, they are one and the same. That land will be destroyed. They will be destroyed. So here in Isaiah 26, he's prophesying the destruction of the Rephaim and saying that they will not be raised up. And their parents, the Titans, the sons of God from Genesis 6, they'll be destroyed as well. What's really interesting when you go to Ezekiel 39, verse 11, there is a reference there to something called the Valley of the Travelers east of the sea. And I typed in the wrong. There we go.
Ezekiel 39, what verse?
Verse 11. This is the end of the war of Gog and Magog.
We got it. Yep. And
on that day,
yep,
I will give to Gog a place. And on that day, by the way, is a phrase that means basically the final battle, when God appears on the battlefield. We're talking about Armageddon, okay?
Yeah.
On that day, I will give to Gog a place for burial in Israel, the Valley of the Travelers east of the sea. Now, this is a reference to the valley east of the Dead Sea, basically between Jericho on the west side of the Jordan River and on the east side of the river where ancient Sodom was located, northwest of Mount Nebo. It will block the travelers, for there Gog and all his multitude will be buried. Now, that word travelers, we think of this as meaning people on vacation in Jordan or something, going up and down the King's Highway. But the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible has an entry for travelers. That was the word used by the Canaanites for the spirits of the Rephaim. And according to the scholars who wrote the DDD and that entry for the DDD, In Ezekiel 39:11, it has to be considered a reference to these divine or supernatural entities. So it will block the what does that mean, to block the travelers? We speculate that it means they will not be raised, just as Isaiah prophesied in Isaiah 26. They are dead, they will not live. They are Rephaim, they will not arise. And here, God will place the war of Gog and Magog concludes somewhere between Jerusalem and ancient Sodom, but the valley of the travelers, the valley of the Rephaim. And there are a couple of references to stops on the Exodus trail just before they get to Mount Nebo, which is, again, it's in line of sight just a few miles away from the site of ancient Sodom, that are named for places that refer to spirits of the dead. One is called Ovoth, which means literally spirits of the dead. The root behind the word is Ov, again, that ritual pit from which you would summon spirits from the netherworld. The next one is called Ai Ha-Avarim, which means ruins of the travelers. And I think that was a reference to the 1,500 dolmens, which are megalithic funerary monuments that used to be at the base of the hill on which Sodom stood. So there's something about that area that is supernaturally supercharged. But more than this, I think this is why it's relevant. The war of Gog and Magog, a future event that concludes with Armageddon, and it will block the travelers, for there Gog and all his multitude will be buried. Armageddon will be a battle at which the Antichrist leads into battle an army of demonically possessed super soldiers. Who knows? I mean, this will literally be the ultimate zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. That's what Dr. Missler would his teaching on transhumanism. That's like 2 hours long. Will just. I mean, for most people, they're like, "Oh man, I got 10 minutes in," and I'm like, "Man, I know it's a science lesson, but you got to pay attention." Because, that converging of the scientific and the spiritual, the mythological, it's getting, and that's what I wanted you to try to tie that into today, because especially when you're talking about these things being birthed out of demonic rituals, and we now have, especially, your background in radio, my dealings as a musician, we're seeing this. It used to be kind of rumor, or it was only just kind of, only those heavy metal guys are into that Satan worship stuff, but everybody else is cool. And now they've been doing satanic rituals, which, in American Music Awards now, 15 years now, like you just really can't touch most of this music with a 10-foot pole, because it's demonically supercharged. And that's what I was wanting to know. Where are you seeing this? I know, in that talk, when you tied Baal, because you said, well, I don't think it was fire that touched it was lightning, because God was mocking Baal, and you walked from, this is what he was called back in the day, from post-flood, and and then at some point we even started calling him Thor. I was like, well, I gotta give away that Thor T-shirt. That's it.
I know.
He's like, yeah, he's basically Satan. I was like, golly, he just got to ruin everything.
Love those movies too.
Yeah.
No, it is surrounding us. But here's the thing: when you've got eyes to see, and you understand the nature of the conflict going on, and you recognize the messaging that is being shoved down, pushed through our television screens and through our gaming consoles at our kids, you can talk to them about it. You don't necessarily have to make them give everything up, but at least to have a conversation. This is why,
to be aware.
Yeah, because this is what they want you to think. They want you to think that, Daddy is really mean, that God the Father is not Jesus, gentle Jesus, meek and mild, or whatever. No, I'm sorry. You cannot start down that road of picking and choosing what you like out of the Bible and creating your own theology, because then what you're doing is creating a God in your image, and that's not how any of this works. So we're in a spiritual war. The fallen realm doesn't really care what we believe, as long as it's not the one thing that's true. I mean, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of intolerant and exclusive, isn't it? Not very inclusive, but that's the reality. But the thing is this: his burden, his yoke, as he put it, is light. he takes all of this stuff on us. He took all of this stuff on us when he went to the cross. And so we have no call, no justification whatsoever for condemning him or his teachings as being, anyway, misogynistic, racist, bigoted, or anything.
All the things that Richard Dawkins,
Right. And of course, now he's come to realize, like, oh, wait a minute, this
Islam
thing is really.
I consider myself a cultural Christian, mostly because I don't want to get my head chopped off.
Yeah. It's. I just want to use your morality. I just don't want to have to, really take. I don't want to have to
answer to a God. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sadly, I'm going to have to answer to Glory here, because I could tell by the yipping and the yapping that she's getting close to needing to go outside before we have a cleanup on aisle 3 here. So
that's all right. We'll have to just have you back. Is there anything you want to kind of want to land this with? Because I know for a lot of people that have never heard some of this before, you're probably gonna have to pick up your brain off the floor and put it back in and rewatch this a couple times. And I know he's not official doctor, but I'm just keep on calling him doctor. I'm just I'm speaking it into existence, brother. I'm proclaiming it over you. So maybe the angels in heaven call you doctor. Right. There's lots of material and teachings. Yeah,
probably up there saying, "Bless his pointy little head."
Well, I think sometimes we impress them, and other times they're just like, "Oh gosh."
Yeah. Do I need to save him from this one, Lord? Okay. All right.
Yeah. Again with this one.
I hear you, Glory.
Yeah, but if there's any kind of parting thoughts or words that you want to leave us with before you head out.
Basically, just this is a serious conflict, and we need to take it seriously and train up our children to understand that this is serious. I tell you what, the reason we wrote the book Giants, Gods, and Dragons was to encourage the church to look at those entities by those strange names and realize God in the Bible calls them giants, gods, and dragons, and that they're a lot of what the prophets wrote about, the apostles taught about, is in response to those entities who've rebelled against our Creator. Our stuff, sadly, is not aimed at young readers, but I'll tell you what, if as a 12-year-old, 10-year-old in church, if they'd read Job 41 to me and said, "Now, what do you think this sounds like?" Dragon? Yes, dragons are real. Oh, yes. Wow. The Bible would have been a whole lot cooler. And I think we do our kids a disservice when we say, well, this is just the imagination of a tribal chieftain living in the desert 3,400 years ago. Mm-hmm. No, God says this stuff is real. We need to take it as real and live accordingly.
I agree. Doc, we're going to have you back to because I want to see how you tie this into end time prophecy. But this was wonderful. Where can people sow into your ministry? Is it right here through Gilbert House?
GilbertHouse.org. We've got a donate button there, and we sure appreciate it.
Beautiful. Well, I encourage y'all, especially those of you that have been listening to Brother Gilbert and Sister Gilbert for years, to sow into their ministry. Ministry don't happen just willy-nilly. People got to take time out of their lives, time away from their families for prayer and study. So sow into them. I'm going to be sowing into them after I end this call. So
God bless you. Thank you.
Yeah. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you and your wife peace and health and prosperity, man. Many blessings to you, Doc. Thank you so much, and go take care of the puppy. I'll wrap up with everybody here with the show here in a minute. So, but we'll let you go.
Thank you, brother.
Many blessings. Thank you for coming. Man, did that blow y'all's minds? Whew, I'm telling you, I have listened to dozens of hours of his teaching. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't listened to as much of Brother Gilbert as I have Chuck Missler yet, but I think he's starting to catch up with Eli Marzulli because what I love is the contextual, biblical, and non-biblical history. This is what these tribes were doing. This is what happened. The Greeks were doing the same time that Israel was doing this, right? He puts it all together in the same time to make it one history, because I think oftentimes those of us in church look at it as, well, this is what's happening in the Bible, and we have no idea what's happening in the rest of the world, right? outside of when Yeshua comes on the scene, then it's like, oh, okay, well, now we have Rome. Rome's an empire. Okay, yeah, but when did Caesar take over? Like when was the first Roman emperor? When would that happen inside of the context of biblical history, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Trust me. I had to start ignoring you guys because he's pulling up. It's the Septuagint version. I'm pulling up the Jewish Orthodox version. I come back and look at y'all's chat, and I'm like, oh boy, these boys are off the rails. But hey, thank goodness. Bible teaching and these conversations can be entertaining as well as insightful, as well as a blessing, right? Yes, it does. I tell you, there's nothing has been more scrutinized than the holy books of the Lord that we call the book. The Bible is exactly what it means. So, y'all, it is almost sundown. So Shabbat Shalom to all my Shabbat observing friends and family. For all my friends that don't observe it, well, Shabbat Shalom anyway. But, thank God it's Friday. I haven't had dinner, so I'm going to go spend some time with my wife and have a little date here and maybe I'll be able to come back when she goes to bed and do a little music live stream. So, well, Nick, you've also had the benefit of having, I think 2 or 3 live streams with Dr. Gilbert. So, it's like, me and Dr. Gilbert, we go way back. So I can go over here and make some jokes about people with 15 digits and 3 thumbs up, and it goes to 11. I did catch that when I was literally trying to hold back laughter because I didn't want Dr. Gilbert to think I wasn't paying attention or laughing at him. But y'all, if you haven't done so before I get out of here, make sure you subscribe to the channel. So I don't know where you are watching from, but if you haven't done so, I need you to, oh my gosh, I hit the wrong button. Go to subscribe and hit the notification bell for Soul Vitamins. So make sure you subscribe and hit the notification for Soul Vitamins. Also, I have a brand new single coming out. As the deer pants for the water, so my soul longeth after thee, and I don't know what I did with the artwork. Hold up. Let me find the artwork real quick, because if you guys haven't seen it, especially Nick, because Nick is anti-technology. He's, Nick, I'm just going to start calling you Amish Goss. That's actually got a nice ring to it, Amish Goss. Oh, I like that. But I like that. So here we go. This is the new single right here. As the Deer, artwork from my brother Brandon Cloud over there at Jacob's Tent. So it's got some other songs on there, but the As the Deer that you guys have seen me doing the live streams about. So that is going to be on. Oh my gosh, what's the date? I think the date is October 24th is when that's going to come out. So October 24th, As the Deer will come out. So I need you guys, when I get the links, to help me spread the word. Help me spread the word and get that out to everybody. So in the meantime, make sure you go to your Luddite. I love it. Make sure you go to my website and pull up one of my playlists. This is Gabriel Bello. It's on Apple Music. It's on YouTube or on Spotify, or in Nick's case, you're going to have to get a phonograph. You have to crank the phonograph, get an LP, get an 8-track, get a cassette tape. He's from the 80s. I think he's from the late 70s. So, yeah, Nick would be a cassette tape. But, yeah, we've got This is Gabriel Bello. It's nearly every song I've released so far on Apple Music. It's also on YouTube for free, and if you use Spotify, I'm not a big fan of Spotify because their pay rates stink. It's horrible for musicians, but if that's what you use, then there you go. So make sure you check those out. I think that's it. And of course, if you haven't gotten yourself a Gabriel Bello t-shirt, that Jesus deserves more than 4 chords, I'm going to be, before the year's out. Oh, you know what? We're not going to talk about the store because we've got something more important to be talking about. So we are going to be making some, huge steps. I was in homing pigeon, please. Yes. I was in By Faith Studio today, scrubbing the floors. I'm going to be sealing the floor tomorrow. I'm going to be taking a speaker in there, blasting some whole tones music. It's going to be a holy consecration as I seal the floors, because I'm sealing the floors because I ordered the insulation for By Faith Studio for the rooms. So praise the Lord. We've had a couple large donations come in. $2,000 came in, and let me see if I can do this. I think is it this one? What's the one with yeah, so if I go this way, then there we go. So yeah, it was $2,000 for the insulation. So the insulation has been purchased. We're going to install it ourselves, myself, my father-in-law, and some wonderful brothers from Carolina Presbyterian. I might even get a couple other recruits. So that's going to save us about $4,000 in installation. After that, I'm today sending an email to the contractor to do the sheetrock. I'm lining up the glass, the doors. I mean, we're getting this thing done. We will be in By Faith Studio before this year is up. So if the Lord leads you, please sow into this. You know, if you got $5, $10, $50, but we are going to be in By Faith Studio before the end of the year. Yes, the By Faith Studio is on my property. It's literally like 60 yards over that way. I have 4 acres. Bless the Lord, that the Lord has blessed my family with 4 acres. The building's on our property. So I'm literally going to be able to walk out the back door and do late night live streams, play the saxophone, where Real Music Hangout's going to be relaunched. It's going to be, I'm telling y'all, I'm excited, and I'm a little just, I'm in my spirit. I'm kind of shaking, because this is going to be a whole new season. I believe this is what, hold up. I got to bring the camera close. So as the Jordan, the guys that, come here. Y'all, I'm about to step into what God has been preparing me for my entire life. It's crazy. That's a heavy statement. And this is going to be what I do until he comes or takes me home. So this is big. This is really big, man. I mean, 20 plus, almost 30 years of full-time ministry and serving in ministry for, well over 30 years. And now it's going to culminate in that building, in that that building being open and being able to train the next generation and release music and write songs and do live stream music streams and do these interviews with Dr. Gilbert and Rod and, Gary Oliver, Ron Canoli. We're going to be lining up another one with, we're going to be having Paul Wilbur again, because I'm going to be doing some ministry with him in a few weeks. So yeah, pretty crazy, tremendous stuff. So support Dr. Gilbert. If you can support me at Give Send Go for By Faith Studio, it's going to be, I think on Give Send Go, it has it at like 47,000. So that's about, and we've raised, oh man, I just had the thing up. Let's, reopen, close tab. What was it? No, not that one. Yeah, there's about 7,000 in there. So yeah, there's about 40 more we got to raise. So, yeah, 3 thumbs, 3 thumbs. I'm going to throw my toe up and throw, 3 thumbs up. Yeah, so it's going to be tremendous, y'all. So, Lord willing, we'll see you here later tonight for another live stream. We'll do some composition, music composition, some saxophone, or just do some live worship. So, but the time is coming where By Faith Studio is going to be done. I'm going to have all my tools available, my talk box, my iwi, and be able to make noise unto the Lord at any time of day. So, all right. Blessings to Dr. Gilbert for that interview. I'm going to keep on calling him doctor until he actually gets his doctorate. So, love you guys so much. Love y'all so much. Nick, do me a favor, man. I'm going to hit up Dr. Gilbert, but if you got Miss Vicky Joy Anderson's contact info, shoot it over to me, because I need to get her set up for an interview as well. That's it. I'm going to go have dinner with my wife. I love y'all. Jesus loves you, and so do I. And let me make sure I have the right song up ready to go. So y'all have a great evening. Peace out.
Coming to this house.